Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and today we're going to be revisiting the Taichi and its BIOS because ASRock have contacted me over Facebook and YouTube, and I don't think they actually emailed me, but they did contact me about the last video where I just lost it at that point because I was like, okay, the 2.0 BIOS was bad. It can't possibly get worse, and it did. But they contacted me, asked what it is that they could do for me, and actually they asked if I have any further feedback, which I will be using because there's still some minor sort of, like, nothing as bad as losing your settings every time you change BCLK, but there is some minor things I still don't really like about the BIOS on the motherboard. So I will be, hopefully just give them feedback on that. Hopefully that'll get changed, or I'm not really sure. But yeah, so there's a new BIOS, 2.30, and that actually fixes everything, so we'll check it out. And then we'll also we'll check out the volt mod. Well, volt mod, it doesn't actually change the voltage, but we'll check out the little mod I did in the last video, and then if it's working and what kind of difference you get if you actually measure off of the socket versus back of the off of the capacitor bank right next to the V-core VRM output, so right off of, like, basically right next to the inductors, because that actually is like a big difference, and I want to show you why you measure off of the back of the socket. Yeah, so with that out of the way, let's get right to it. I'll move you on to the that's the setup. I'll have to move the mic, so I'll go quiet for a, well, actually I won't. So there we go. Ta-da! So the multimeter is plugged into the little, we have it on the little volt mod here. This just pulls ground off of the standoff right here. Yes, pulling ground right off of the socket would get you slightly lower voltage readings, slightly. Generally, if you have at least one of these probes hooked up correctly, the reading is good. So it is pretty accurate. Like, changing ground points hasn't, like with in other testing, like changing ground points hasn't made huge differences for me. I mean, I could get the ground point closer to the VRM by, like, moving it from that standoff to, let's say, where's that one? There's this one. That's closer. Barely. Yeah. So there we go. Right now it's reading 0, system's turned off. Let me just switch the HDMI. Nope, I want to go, there we go. And ta-da, let's fire it up. And right now it's a 0.9, yeah, so I do actually have an overclock right now on there. It should be 4 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz memory. So, yeah. And we're in. So yeah, you can see this is working just fine. At idle, you won't see a huge difference, but it will still show a difference. So I'll just move this, and I'll probe on the capacitor bank. So that was reading, like, that's reading 1.43 ish, and this is with LLC level 3. I'll show you that in the BIOS later. So let's move it onto capacitor in the V-core VRM, and there we go. There, and now it's reading 1.47. Right, 1.47 at idle off of the V-core VRM versus 1.43 on the back of the socket. And then if we compare that against my BIOS settings, right here, you will notice I have 1.425 set in the BIOS. I'm actually, I think, yeah, 1.425 level 3 LLC. So the reading we have right now is all very well and good. Also, for a few people who are wondering, the level 3, level 1. So level 1 on ASRock is actually the highest level of LLC. On Asus, level 5 would be like your highest level, but ASRock just has their LLC levels in reverse. It really doesn't matter. This is just naming conventions. So yeah. So what changed? Well, for one thing, it doesn't drop your, it doesn't lose your timings. That's progress already. I can put in whatever I want here and here. And then we can, all right, no. And it stays there. So that's gone. That's been fixed. I'll just put it back to 1616. And if you change the BCLK, nothing is affected, which is really nice. So, yeah. Those two were basically my main issues with the motherboard, because, like, the thing about the BCLK feature is this is one of the few X370 boards to have BCLK. I mean, amongst the high-end ones, there's quite a few. The Gaming K7 from Gigabyte has BCLK. The Crosshair 6 Hero has BCLK. The K5 and K3 from Gigabyte also have BCLK. The Taichi has BCLK. And then the Professional Gaming, the Fatality Professional Gaming from ASRock, that one also has BCLK overclocking. So all of these boards have BCLK and overclocking. And yeah, and the reason why, so this is really one of those features that, for me, is a good reason to buy a Taichi. If you don't need BCLK overclocking, you can kind of buy lower-end motherboards, definitely, because, let's be completely honest, you can get a good enough VRM for an 8-core, 8-core Ryzen CPU on some of the cheaper boards. Memory overclocking, as long as you have a good kit of memory, is going to be pretty much the same everywhere. Most motherboards, if you have a good kit of Samsung B die, it will hit 3200 megahertz on, I'm going to guess, pretty much every single motherboard. The kit I'm using right here is the Team Group T-Force Extreme. This is rated at 3733, 18, 20, 20, 39, 2T, 1.35 volts. And this kit has, it does 3200 really easy, even on motherboards like the Asus B350 Plus, which, the B350 Plus is really like a budget motherboard. So, yeah, it's, if you're choosing a motherboard, for me, the Taichi was a case of I really wanted BCLK. So when I got it, and then the BIOS wiped every time you changed the BCLK a little bit, I got really, really annoyed. Either way, I'm just going to save this profile here, and I'll show you why you why you can't just, oh yeah, so a few people also asked about this. Down here is where you save profiles on the BIOS here, so just save that, and I'll save this as 4G 3.5. Actually, no, I usually do, no, I'm going to do 4G 35 C16. There we go. And so that's saved now. You can also save to you can save to disks as well. So like flash sticks, if you want to save your BIOS profiles to those. Sometimes that's a good idea, because if you update the BIOS or something, you will lose all your profiles. Though I don't think the profiles are the profiles from an older BIOS won't necessarily work on a newer one. So yeah, they've patched pretty much the only two issues I've had with the BIOS, the two big ones. One thing I would like to see is this is the processor, the on-die termination. First of all, I would really appreciate if it actually said what the auto setting is. The second thing is, I would really appreciate, and if it wasn't buried, in the advanced menu under DRAM timing configuration, that'd be nice. But I get that, that's really a minor issue. It's nothing as bad as the whole wiping your settings. So, I'm going to shut the board down. I'm going to shut this down, wipe the BIOS, and then, not actually sure. Yeah, you know what? We'll try that. We'll try to cold boot 3500. So let's wipe that. So the board has a BIOS clear button on the back of the I/O. So there. Let's boot that up. When you first boot this board off of a BIOS wipe or right after a crash, it does take a little while to post. But after the first boot, it boots quick. So, yeah. And also, as the BIOS gets updated, I'm sure this will get faster. Personally, I don't care about how long something takes to post. Let's go into the BIOS. So now we're at the usual, default settings. So we put overclock mode into manual. This is one thing they've changed. Your timings aren't accessible unless you enable XMP. This doesn't actually matter. On some motherboards, enabling XMP even when you were overwriting all the settings with your own ones actually would lead to better results. Like, just enabling XMP would help because XMP profiles are basically a bunch of it's a bunch of settings saved onto the memory stick by the manufacturer. So on some motherboards, just enabling XMP can actually help memory overclocking, even if you're completely if you're replacing the primary timings, because just enabling XMP will sometimes change some things on the motherboard. I haven't noticed anything like that on the Taichi. However, having XMP enabled and then changing it doesn't change anything, really. Let's just punch in 16, 16, 16, 16, 36 again. I'm going to put CPU core clock at 30. Out. That's not going to boot. That. 110, 1.425. So we're gonna try cold boot 3520. But this is not going to work at all. At least it shouldn't. This motherboard has surprised me a few times on past videos where it's like, oh yeah, this won't boot. And then it booted. So it actually defaults, like the default LLC setting is level 3, so just leave it like that. This, I like to set it lower, like level 2 or level 3. Because the SoC really doesn't pull that much current, so the LLC doesn't actually do that much on it. Because LLC is basically, it compensates for V-droop due to current draw. So, yeah. Fixed voltage, I want 1.1. And disable both of these. So CPU over voltage protection and CPU over current protection. Over voltage protection exists to stop you from doing things like that. If you have this enabled, it'll prevent you from booting with that there. Actually, it won't let you apply that voltage at boot up. But the board already has the, you already have the safety feature of the stable mode versus OC mode. So if you're in stable mode, you can't actually set more than 1.6 volts. So, yeah, you can go down, but you can't go up above 1.6. 1.6 isn't particularly safe for daily usage. It does stop you from instantly destroying your chip. So, yeah, 1.425 volts, that's the maximum recommended voltage by AMD. 1.1 volts SoC. AMD hasn't really mentioned what the maximum SoC voltage is, so I'm just going to say Asus recommends not going above 1.2, and I've personally never needed much more than 1.1 anyway for getting memory settings working so far. I've gone all the way up to 3600 already with the board. I was working on 3700, but haven't gotten there yet. Maybe in the future. So, anyway, the CPU over voltage protection prevents you from being an idiot and killing your CPU with voltage. And the OCP, overcurrent protection, this is more for your motherboard than your CPU. Overcurrent protection, if the CPU is pulling too much current, which really is going to be a problem for your motherboard VRM, not for the CPU itself, it'll actually prevent your system from dying. I haven't tested how it kicks in. I think it just turns off the VRM. That's typically how these overcurrent protection features work. Though, since it is CPU level, it might actually throttle the CPU if it detects too high power draw. However, one thing I've noticed is, at least on the Taichi, at least one set of the current sensors report absolute garbage numbers. So on the Taichi, sure, just turn it off, because it doesn't. The Taichi VRM is going to be fine, really. Like, you're never going to overload the VRM on the Taichi or the Crosshair 6 Hero. The Gigabyte Gaming K7, that again, all of the sort of high-end X370 boards, just turn off your OCP. Because there's really no reason to have it turned on. On lower-end motherboards, depending on what you're doing, I'd recommend, like, if you're not sure, leave it on. So, yeah. Voltage for the memory, I'm going to set 1. Well, technically, this RAM should probably do it on 1.35, but let's do 1.4. VTT DDR will default to half of your DRAM voltage. You'll want to tweak this up and down depending on what memory kit you have. Actually, let's put 1.5 just because I've already tested with that. And my memory kit prefers slightly less than half. So yeah, that's all set up. And we shall try to boot this. And it shouldn't. Ideally, it won't. So, and wait, one more thing. Because this is one feature I really like. DRAM timing configuration. This right here is how many times the motherboard will try to boot your settings before it gives up. I personally like to have that set to 2 because there's a few post errors which are really like, if you get an F9 post code on this motherboard, it basically means that your memory settings are completely wrong and you can forget about them ever working. If you get a 94, then just pressing the reset button will get it working. From so far, I've never not been able to get past a 94. And so, and it's not like I need to retry several times, like I don't have to reset several times to get past a 94, so I don't need to have a high fail count. And processor on-die termination, just leave that on auto. In my experience, the auto setting on this motherboard is smarter than me. I can't get the, like, yeah, I haven't had much success getting this working with the on-die termination so far. Though on the Asus board, I remember, like, the Asus board just works completely different on the on-die termination. I actually needed less and less, but I sort of think that was more timings related. I need to do more testing on that. So anyway, let's save and restart. Hopefully it'll throw a... It's gonna boot. It's gonna make it. Okay. There we go. So it booted that. It's going to take a while because going from bone stock to 3500, it's going to have to do the... It's going to... Yeah, there we go. Finally booted. So it has to train the memory, which takes a while. So, yeah. Now we're at 3520 on the memory. So let's see if we can go higher. And see? This right here is why I didn't like the old BIOS, because I want to tweak my memory by 100 megahertz and I'd have to rewrite all of my settings every single time. One thing they also still need to patch is this isn't CPU frequency, this is ratio. And they really should do the same. Like the memory, right? That's the 32x ratio. That's 32. That there is 32 times 113. And so that works out to 3616. But the CPU ratio doesn't currently multiply properly yet. So hopefully there'll be another BIOS that patches that. And I'm going to tell them about it. So yeah, that's too high. So right now I have to use a calculator to figure out how low I need that ratio because I can't do it in my head. And that's 35.5. So this should be about 4 gigahertz, 10 megahertz when we boot. So let's see if that fires up. This still should work. And I'm not saying these settings are necessarily stable. You know, just because it boots, especially with RAM, just because it boots doesn't mean anything. You need to do a lot of stress testing, but this is just for demonstration purposes, so yeah. Again, it's going to take a while, especially as you go into higher and higher memory settings. It's going to take longer and longer. And we're at B2, and now it's posting. Is my mouse not plugged in? Oh no, it's fine. There we go. And so let's get Cinebench and hardware info 64. So for monitoring Ryzen CPUs, I really recommend using just hardware info 64, the latest version, because you do get basically all the readings you need. So it varies motherboard to motherboard where you'll find the readings, but you will, all the information is always somewhere in this giant list of sensors. So first things first, this right here, these voltages, just completely ignore them. They're just the vid. They literally don't mean anything. What you actually want to look at for voltage is this right here, CPU core voltage SVI2. So that is the report from the actual voltage controller on the motherboard. That's what the voltage controller says the CPU is getting. Then above that you have CPU temperature. This is adjusted for the plus. I don't know because I haven't had an X series Ryzen CPU, but this should be adjusted for the plus 20-degree offset that some of those have. Here you have the core current readout. This thing is so ridiculously wrong. You're not going to believe it. So let's switch to the wait, how am I going to do this? Let's blow this up. There. That's how we're going to do it. So I'm going to open up Cinebench. There we go. And these settings aren't fully stable, so it might crash. But there, so we can see right now we have 1.42-ish on the back of the socket, and then when we press run, it actually boosts up to, you know, I had 1.425 set in the BIOS, so right now this is reading 1.426. In OS, we're seeing 1.412. So this is very, very close to, like, legit readings. So, like, they're really, really close together. So at this point, I'm going to trust them. And let's move this onto the output of the VRM, and I'll show you what, like, the VRM will boost, because basically, well, it's best to see. There we go. There. So that's the VRM output. So the VRM is spitting out 1.45 volts instead of the, well, let's see, I'll try get it off of the choke. This is really awkward because I'm trying to be near the mic enough to, whatever, we'll just leave it like that. Why is it running so slow? Don't tell me I have the, oh, okay, so there's one other little glitch that this board has. We're right now at 1.7 gigahertz. There's a, we're gonna have to restart. So this is actually a glitch. I think every time you change the BCLK, the board sort of forgets your CPU ratio or something, because it does this all the time. Because at this point, it actually should load up 4 gigahertz. Also, if you crash, you'll see that all of your settings are still technically written in the BIOS. They won't actually apply when you boot up. So there's still some minor glitches here and there, but these are the kind, like, this is the kind of stuff I'm willing to overlook compared to some of the, you know, absolute, like, deleting my settings. Like, deleting my settings, not okay. Doing, you know, acting a little bit strange when booting high BCLK overclocking and stuff, yeah, I'm fine with that. And at this point, it should actually go straight to 4 gigahertz. I think. We'll check in the BIOS, just in case. Oh, that's interesting. 3390. Yeah, okay, so we'll have to do... So, I'm 99% sure that's this. Just disable those. So those are your power saving features. And that should fix the whole low CPU clock thing. And it threw an error. I should probably drop it back down under 4 gigahertz Because it's not fully stable at these settings right now, and it's just gonna... whatever. Oh, yeah, it failed again. Can't get into Windows, so I'll have to drop the... I'll drop the core clock. Hopefully it's not a memory issue. It might be. Hard to say when it crashes after the... and that's an F9. Okay, I'm inclined to believe at this point that it's the memory. So... yeah, okay, so the board just wiped the BIOS. Because we did fail 2 times in a row to boot, so... and this is the... oh no, there goes the second time. So unless it forgot how many... oh, it forgot again. Yeah, the BIOS is still kind of forgetful. But it's... like, at this point I'm willing to work with it. But, yeah, there's still minor issues that need to get patched. Now it's booting 1.42. It forgot the CPU ratio, I guarantee it. And we're on the slow post. Should have had a better plan, except it's really hard to have a plan when the motherboard behaves like this all the time. Either way, we can just drop the BCLK down a bit, run even lower CPU core clock, and let's just boot that. At this point, it should be bulletproof in terms of stability. And I'll also have to check that I'll have to go into the BIOS one more time, because I do believe it probably forgot all the memory timings, which it has a tendency to do. And indeed it has. So here you can see that we're now at 18, 20, 20, 39 instead of the 16, 16s that I have actually dialed in. So how do you fix that? You just go through every single one of the settings and refresh them. I know. It's just, yeah. And at this point, yeah, we're almost 4 gigahertz. So the CPU worked. And at this point, the memory should take, unless it throws an error again, and everything should be fine from here on out. Yeah, so now it's posting at full speed. And Windows is going to try repair itself. I hate this. There has to be... I need to figure out some way to disable that, because it's never going to repair anything. Yeah, just restart. And now it's posting slowly again. Well, not as bad, but still. And we're finally back in Windows again. So, let's get Cinebench opened up and hardware info. This time it should actually be at 4 gigahertz. So yeah, the board does have a sort of tendency to false start. So now the vid is 1.425, which we'll ignore. Memory we can see is 3520, 16, 16, 16, 36 timings. The other timings, like, this is cool that it can actually read those timings, because they're not accessible in the BIOS. And here we have temperature, core voltage, core current draw. So this is interesting. Right now it's saying we have 48 amps going into the VR, like coming out of the vCore VRM, and 14 amps, 12 amps going through the SoC. And the entire CPU, and apparently the CPU plus SoC is pulling around 60 watts. Let's check with my dodgy but functioning current clamp how close that is to reality. So I'm gonna blow this up. again. And you can see I have it in current mode. So the thing about this thing is you don't trust it to the 10th of an amp. Really, under half an amp, you don't trust it because just tilting it the wrong way around gives you all kinds of interesting readings. So, yeah. I do need better equipment, but this is enough for the bare minimum. So let's just get that clamped onto the 12-volt rails there. There. And you can't see that because it's glared. And you can't see that either. Well, right now it's reading about an amp. Right? And that's 12 volts. It's reading about an amp. This 60 watts figure here is just complete garbage because there's not really much more than an amp going into the VRM. And this is a 12 volt wire. And that actually, this 12 volt connection right here powers the entire vCore VRM, I've checked, the entire SoC VRM, and the memory VRM. So the current readings that this is currently showing and the power readings it's showing are garbage because there's not enough current going into the VRM to produce that much power. Alright. Anyway, alright, let me just get it at the angle I'll hold it. Calibrate. There. Hop. And yeah, we're getting about an amp still. So let's run Cinebench. And you can see hardware info is reading 145 amps, 1.4 volts vCore. Except the VRM is only pulling about 15.3 amps. So the amount of current going into the entire, like basically RAM, SoC, and CPU is at 15.3 amps times 12, which I can't tell you off of the top of my head what that is. And I have checked that the voltage is actually 12. It's like 12.1. So that works out to 185 watts. Whereas hardware info says the CPU and SoC are pulling 224, which is physically impossible because the current clamp isn't showing, like, there's not enough power on 12 volts going into the VRM to produce 223 watts of power on the other end. So either my current clamp is off by 40 watts, or the sensors on the motherboard are off by 40 watts. And considering that the current measurement method that like most VRMs use is, especially International Rectifier, they use, they measure the DC resistance of the inductors. And this current measurement method is basically only good for about plus minus 10%. It's really unreliable. I'm inclined to believe that the motherboard is just reading about, 40 amps too much, which I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's the only way because we can check the voltage, right? We know how much vCore the CPU is getting, and actually, even more accurate would be to measure the voltage coming right out of the VRM because that voltage drop, so on the VRM, we're going to read like 1.5 volts with the current setting, so, right? So right now we're reading, let's put that to voltage. So right now we're reading 1.42, which is idle. If we run Cinebench, we're going to see that it goes to 1.43, and that's on the back of the socket. If we measure off of the vCore VRM, I should get some curved probes or something. There, you can see we're reading 1.48. This big difference in voltage from behind the socket to the VRM is basically, you have 1.48 volts coming out of the VRM, and between the CPU socket and the CPU itself, you have the electrical resistance there causes that voltage drop. So you actually have a power loss of, well, I think we're 4 gigahertz, almost 4 gigahertz, 1.425 volts. We're around 100 amps on the CPU. So that's a, 50 millivolts voltage drop. So you have like 5 watts of heat being produced by just the copper between the CPU and the VRM. And yeah, that's not being included in the calculation because this is just vCore times, let's Basically, it's just doing vCore times this, and then it gets that 229 watt. Well, actually, it doesn't even get that one. So, yeah, just don't trust the power readings, because they, at best, it's physically impossible. Like, they're just completely physically impossible, or my equipment is completely garbage. Though I'm kind of more inclined to believe that this is correct compared to the voltage controller. So yeah, that's it for this video. Props to ASRock for, you know, quickly fixing the BIOS. It actually took me longer to get around to doing this video than it took ASRock to fix the thing I was complaining about. So props to them for that. And I'm just gonna turn off the there. Otherwise, I'm getting a face full of that. So yeah, props to ASRock for fixing the BIOS, and that's it for this video. I hope it illuminated you on some of the details of Ryzen overclocking. And I mean, I didn't do any stability testing. I just basically ran you through some random stuff. But yeah, I hope you found this informative, educational, and yes, end of video. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Notification button, you could go press that. I have a Patreon, as well as a PayPal and shirts. You could go, you know, throw some money at any of them. Also, actually, one new thing I've added is on the AHO, actually Hardcore Overclocking blog, there is now a section called the Junkyard, where I am just going to be dumping various hardware I have around here that I no longer want. Right now, there's just a bunch of memory kits, and one of them is already technically reserved. So, yeah, I need to go update that. But yeah, if you would like to support AHOC, go check that out. It's going to be down in the description below. And if you do support me, maybe I could get some better current measuring equipment and not have to rely on, well, those readings which say that these readings are impossible. And by these readings, I mean these. It's so hard to orientate myself on camera. These readings right here in hardware info are like, yeah. So better equipment, we'd know for sure. And yeah, that's actually something I'm annoyed about. That's a big thing for me, get better equipment. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. And I grabbed the wrong mouse. There we go. Goodbye. For real this time.